Facial dysmorphia. I was last night years old when I realised that facial dysmorphia is a thing. So for me, for the longest time, as long as I can remember, I've had this. So I just didn't know what it was. So I even remember in my early teens making my face my lock screen because I struggled to remember what I looked like. And even now, I really struggle. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I go, I am so surprised this did not just crack. And then other times I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, like, something looks okay here today. And it just changes all the time. And so I am aware that women go through different levels of attractiveness throughout their cycle, their monthly cycle. And this is proven by science. Whereas in general, even if that didn't exist, I still struggle with how I look. I was remembering certain parts of my teenage years, and I had seen a TikTok that triggered memories of me and this one friend. We got into like deep diving, like unsolved mysteries, conspiracy theories, and then we really got into like documentaries. And there was one topic we covered, which was people getting into accidents and then just forgetting the last few years of their life or forgetting their adulthood. And we were just really trying to get as to why that would happen, like what would click. But obviously we covered so much ground. And during these escapades, sometimes the thought crossed my mind, what happened if like I got into that situation and I just thought I would not remember what I looked like. And I would just look in the mirror and be like, who is this? And so last night, obviously, I started searching this up a bit, being like, is this a thing? What is this? And then, lo and behold, I found out that facial dysmorphia is a real legitimate thing. To which, first of all, there was a sigh of relief. I was like, oh, amazing. Like, I'm not alone in this. This is a thing. I'm not a weirdo. And well, I don't know how that last part's not true. But yeah, and then I started doing a bit more research, and then I realized that this is really prevalent in abuse and trauma survivors. So if you guys are familiar with my page, or at least seen a little bit of my videos, I have had notes of abuse and adversity within my life. And I think, I might open up about it in more detail in future videos, but for now, yeah, it's no secret that I've gone through that in my life. And to have the awareness that this is actually common for people that have gone through abuse, gone through trauma, this facial dysmorphia happens, that I'm like, oh, I need to deep dive and talk about this, because I clearly am not the only one that's sort of sat there and gone, oh my goodness, like, what is this? And gone through the moments where you look at yourself and you're like, what? Oh, don't know what that was. Yeah, clearly not a weirdo. Clearly, but yeah. So let's deep dive. Hi, I'm getting real close and personal. I'm just going to read out from here, but I just thought because I'm reading that I should get close, and that doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to me, and it's my page. So yeah. Anyways. Definition and misconceptions. So what is facial dysmorphia? What facial dysmorphia actually is a form of body dysmorphic disorder, which is BDD, that focuses on facial features. It's not about being vain or superficial, it's actually a mental health condition. I didn't see that last night. It's a mental health condition. Oh, another one to the list then. Often unrecognised, especially in women, expected to bounce back or stay polished. Okay, that makes sense. So for me, I think, last night I obviously learned about it. So this is still really fresh information to me, but I've already sort of covered the fact that like I've struggled to sort of look at myself in a kind of steady pace and go, yep, that is my face, I recognise it, and then comprehend what I look like on an objective level. Because some days I look at myself and I think, oh, like, she's quite fair, and then other times I'm like, what is that? And yeah, I think it doesn't help that obviously I've gone through the abusive relationships and had a very chaotic childhood. So I've been told by exes that I need to have surgery, and I think one ex at least admitted the fact that he was sort of trying to humble me so that I wouldn't run away and get attention from other guys. So he thought his admitted mind process was the fact that if he humbled me and made me feel like I wasn't pretty enough for anyone, that I would feel very blessed that he did the charitable thing and dated me. And so, yeah, I'm just there like, okay, when like, you know, you have people tell you that you're not attractive, and on top of that, I had obviously signs of emotional abuse, and I find it really awkward to talk about because I'm like, I'm an open book about it, but I think it's very difficult to open up and kind of revisit the abuse that you faced, because you're sort of there like, did that really happen? Like, really? And yeah, but I am going to open up about it more because I think the awareness is so important, and I cannot be a positive mental health advocate if I'm not trying to at least normalize the fact that what others have done to you is nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. So yeah, but obviously this is a thing. Oh, I'm expecting a call from someone. I've been really excited about this call. And for a lot of people, especially the younger generation that are still teenagers now, and even ones that haven't probably been born yet, they're going to really face it from, you know, potential bullying at school. And I think we live in such a digital era now, so that's not just going to be in the space of schools or clubs, that's going to be on the online space, where obviously everything is so image orientated. You know, famous TikTokers, famous Instagrammers, influencers, you know, you don't have to be, you know, the most like Victoria Top Secret model-esque. Like, you just need to have an Instagrammable face. And I'm aware that I've been told I'm attractive, but I do not believe I have an Instagrammable face. I feel like I probably have a face that suits kind of older eras where, you know, you had like a very specific kind of setup. Whereas like now, you need to know how to angle your selfies. You need to know how to do things. And I've met so many absolutely just gorgeous people who don't know how to take a selfie, and their social media does not reflect how gorgeous they really are, which is such a shame, because I'm just there like, you know, you have some people who will never really know how gorgeous they are because of the inability to capture it with their phone. And that's really strange to me, but we sort of do live in that era, and we need to realise that's going to play a part into things like facial dysmorphia, which also raises the point about chronic social media exposure. Unfortunately, kids so early now are being exposed to social media. I can't remember the exact age I started having Instagram. It was something like 14, 15. My mum was really like, she tried to delay me having a phone for as long as possible, but I also remember feeling like the odd one out. I was the last one in my class to get a phone, and that did make me like the odd one out for ages. And they were like, oh, does your mum not love you? Like, she's not going to get you a phone. And I realised as an adult, and having my own kids now, that my mum was doing the utmost to try and save me from that world. But I think parents are now struggling with that balance of like, you don't want your kid to be missing out on things like being part of WhatsApp group chats, that kind of thing. But at the same time, that exposure is so toxic, and unfortunately it's going to have a ripple effect. The traumatic aftermath of whatever method it takes for you to get to this stage of dysmorphia is the fact that you lose that sense of self-awareness, that sense of just feeling like you know your place in the world, just the sense of reality, essentially. Like, you lose that, and unfortunately it's not great, and it probably manifests in more than one way, but facial dysmorphia, body dysmorphia has to be one way that it happens. So where does it all begin? Naturally, in the last minute or so, I've spoken about how some of it started for me, and obviously the origins of that potentially was mostly indicative of the abuse that I faced. And I think, you know, whether you like it or not, as a child, you are so impressionable, you're a sponge. So if you are told something, especially, you know, people think children, they think young children, in your teenage years and even your early adulthood, you are still absorbing information. Like, your brain isn't fully developed until your early 20s. So at that point, you're sort of there like, you're still taking info in. And if you're not being told the most kind of blessing and most growing and nourishing like information that makes you feel like you're blossoming, then naturally you're going to sit there and believe what you're being told. Especially for me, I had kind of a series of people that came into my life that were not really someone I could rely on. So because of that, I just sort of became normalized to what I was being told. Only since having kids and me sort of making an adamant decision that I am going to do better for them and make sure that I break the cycle of whatever toxicity generations of people are facing. And this is not just from my family line. I see this with friends, I see this with strangers. Like, you know, people talk about the old money aesthetic and like, you know, the whole old money desire. But at the same time, there's the kind of discussion, not so much focused on social media, about the kind of old trauma And I think, people do talk about generational trauma, but, it's difficult to kind of admit that you have to be the cycle breaker if you don't want to be that kind of parent or that grandparent, or let that trauma seep through into your children. And naturally there will be elements of it that always will. But anyways, I'm gonna waffle, so started waffling there, let's focus. So it naturally probably starts in the earlier parts of your childhood and life, where you have emotionally unstable or an imbalanced environment, and that will naturally impact you. Especially in today's day and age. Oh, I really needed that green tea. I feel like recently I've been so obsessed with matcha, and I feel like I've taken a huge step back from coffee since I've introduced matcha into my life, that I had a coffee this morning and it felt like it was an alien drink. It was so different to me now that I have been consuming matcha like no tomorrow. So I've weaned back into my herbal teas because I really have sort of just lived off water and matcha, that I'm I need to drink other things. So last night I had a green tea, and then I'm actually using the same tea bag because I think people do forget that green tea, I can't remember, my mum taught me about this, there's a cycle of 7 lives on the green tea. You sort of it has different flavours. And yeah, my strainer that I normally use is broken, so I'm sticking to tea bags, because I try and avoid tea bags because they have microplastic exposure, but we're not talking about that today, so I'm going to go back to the topic. How does this manifest? So I have one friend that I know this to be true. They will check mirrors obsessively. I think they went through their own trauma. Obviously, it's not mine to share, but they do check mirrors obsessively. And I think, there's a difference between kind of going, oh, what does my face look like? Especially, you're wearing makeup, maybe it's a humid day, versus kind of going, how do I look? How do I look? How do I look? Or the other way it could manifest is avoiding mirrors altogether. Another symptom is the feeling that something about the way that you look feels off. Something isn't right. And I think for me, there's always been that, especially after being told by one of my exes that I needed to get nose surgery. I always sort of sit there and go something's not right with my face. Even today, I put a little bit of makeup on, just mostly around my eyes, because I got this new eyeliner. I was really excited to try it. And then once I did it, I was why did my eyes look so small? Why do they look so different today? And then other angles I'm looking at it, I'm but it looks big too. And so I just sort of am in this state of confusion, because I'm on one hand they look small, on one hand they look big. And if someone's watching who doesn't have this, I think it's really interesting for you to kind of grasp how this does play out for someone, because you will look at yourself and it just is this state of what is happening. Something does feel off and you cannot put your finger on it. And not just in mirrors, this happens in photos too. Sometimes you'll look at yourself in a photo and go, but I also want to state that sometimes I look at photos and I know that what I see in the mirror is much better than what is coming out in a photo. So those are the days when I'm to my friends, what have you done? Because that looks 10 times worse than what I'm seeing here right now. And, I think this is a whole social media thing, which plays back into social media being one of the reasons this whole thing starts. But yeah, because it does happen where you take photos that can look way better, and you've got photos that can look way worse than you are. And I think it's also a case of just being photogenic, the lighting, because to capture the right image is an art. It really is the same way someone would capture painting, in a very particular way, that you kind of have to be aware of that before you enter the world of social media and taking photos of yourself. Because I think everything is so accessible now in terms of camera phones that people just do take pictures all the time and forget that the art of a good photo is still an art, and it's not something that is just going to happen anywhere you are. Spotify payment gone through. One of the final things on how it manifests is hyperfixation and comparison. So for myself, I feel quite fortunate that I do avoid comparison, because I think it's like the plague. Once you start comparing yourself, you go down a deep black rabbit hole that just sucks you in, and it's really difficult to escape. So I know one friend, I'm not really friends with her anymore, because I found it very toxic, the whole comparison thing. Not only would she compare herself to random girls on the internet, she would compare herself to her friends, she would compare herself to everything. And it was a case of, is this girl fat? Do you think this one's fat? Do you think this one's fat? Like, oh, am I fat? And then she would, like, you know, just obsess over it to the point that I'm like, well, a lot of these girls that she was showing me, like, are objectively super stunning. And, you know, just to hear her say that would also make other friends in our kind of group uncomfortable, because a lot of the people would sit there and be like, you're showing me a girl that is like an Instagram model, and, you know, some of us just didn't match that. So we were like, how are we supposed to feel if she's calling them fat, ugly, this kind of stuff? And then also matching herself to them, like comparing herself to them, being like, oh, maybe I need to do this more at the gym, maybe I need to do that. And that definitely, I think, was an element of dysmorphia for her. And I think, you know, like anything in life, your individual case will look unique to you. So what my facial dysmorphia or body dysmorphia will look like will be different to somebody else's dysmorphia. And I think I've seen it manifest in different ways, but that doesn't remove the fact that it's a thing. And so, you know, comparison is one thing. So it could shine through in hyperfixation or on flaws. So for myself, I definitely went through a phase where I was just like, oh my goodness, like, what is my face? And I just couldn't pinpoint what didn't click, because it wasn't a case of I didn't like anything. I have been raised in a way which I'm very grateful for. My mum's been very adamant on this, that you need to be grateful for the gift of life. You need to be grateful for the fact that you have functioning health, and, you know, everything else doesn't matter. So I've always had that fundamental where I've got feet to walk on, I'm breathing, I have like health. And obviously after having a near-death experience, I am just grateful for the boring and the mundane existence I have. And it might not be exciting, it might not be the kind of flashy Instagram life everyone has, but I am grateful for the things I do have, and also for just the fact that, you know, I might not have everything in the world, but I've got what I need, and that's fine. And that mindset has been so intrinsic to me feeling good about my existence, because I've always tried to stay very positive minded, but I've seen people who don't have that mindset and how things can quickly deteriorate in their dysmorphia, in their mental health. And so I think it's always about having that moderation and balanced view of the world. But, you know, it does manifest in different ways. So I think, you know, awareness is key. But for myself, even though this is a thing, it's not something that is like ringing alarm bells at the top of my head, because I don't let it get there. Because I do sort of like pull myself back down to earth and go, you know what though, there are bigger problems. There are more things valuable of time and focus than going, how do I look in the mirror? Because, you know, I just thought to myself, even if I'm not attractive, even if I'm not, you know, someone's cup of tea aesthetically, you know, beauty is all in the eye of the beholder. So maybe to someone I'd be attractive. But on top of that, if I am a kind individual, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, that kindness is going to shine through. And when the light gets switched off and, you know, everyone's sitting there, it's the kindness of someone's soul that is the most important. Because I've met some objectively gorgeous guys and girls, and their personality sucks, like sucks. So I'm like, well, I don't care what you say about someone there that might not be your cup of tea aesthetically, but they are deliciously kind. Like, they will share everything that they have, like the love in their heart, with the whole wide world, and never regret it. That I'm like, I want to hang out with them. And so, you know, I think there are so much more important things. And this is obviously a massive diversion from the conversation at hand, but I also think it's important to speak about, because mindset is so important. And clearly I've not let it manifest to the point of being that bad, because I'm looking at how bad it can get. And I've not let it get there because of trying to maintain a positive mindset that is also just kind of aware of the world around me. My friend that would always sit and compare herself to other girls and thinking that she's not good enough, she's not attractive enough, she doesn't have a like gym body enough, that, like, you know, someone in a wheelchair would sit there and be like, I'll take anything to just walk again. Someone else could be sitting there in hospital terminally ill going, what are you thinking about? You've got the ability to go out and look at the leaves, the sunshine, walk in a flower field, and you want to focus on that, to the point that I'm just there like, yeah, like, you know, it might be a case that I might not be the most attractive in the world. You know, there are whole beautiful top models, Instagram baddies. Yes, they are amazing, but that's also not real life. I've met some of these girls in real life at some events, and even though they are gorgeous, the je ne sais quoi they have on camera, on their social media, the presence, that is like a whole thing on their page. And I think it's so important to remember that social media is an illusion. It's someone's expression. It's their way of like showing how they look to the world, and like it's their art page. So whatever it is, I think people need to take a step back from that hyperfixation on social media and how things look, even though it is so important to our world. Because, you know, clearly if it's damaging that many people's mental health and their view of themselves, like, we need to be looking at this. Because, you know, I remember that girl, and she was really like, her life was being impacted by it. She wasn't able to enjoy the present where she actually was because of what was in her phone. And yeah, so next point, motherhood and dysmorphia, because I think we live in an era which really focuses on how women look. Obviously, I'm not taking away from the fact that there is this like fixation on men, but let's be real, the dad bod is like a whole trend. Like, you know, people sit there and go, oh, I don't mind if a guy's got a dad bod, but then there's no romanticizing the mum bod. You know, I've not seen the same wavelength of appreciation for a mother in the same way there's been for a dad bod. And I think it's really unfair, but also conveys that there is also like a motherhood body dysmorphia that happens. And there is so much pressure on mums to bounce back when the science literally indicates that it takes, like, I can't remember the whole spectrum of it, but it's like a minimum 6 months for the initial stage, then a whole year. Then for myself, from personal experience, for me to feel like I'm really back at myself, like similar to when I was pre-pregnancy, is 2 years. But then the whole science shows that it's years for your body to properly sort of get back to a state of kind of being not swollen, having some form of like regulation. But the fact of the matter is your body never goes back. And so I really don't love this whole bounce back thing, because once you've had a baby, your body's changed. And it's a beautiful journey that you go on, because you have done one of the most brilliant, magical, mystical things. You've brought a body, a soul from the unalive world into the alive. You've been this magical portal. And, you know, we should be treated as such. Women's bodies should be respected. But unfortunately, we live in a world which has been very misogynistic, and instead of praising women, it's pushed them down. The animal kingdom does convey that when you do that, things don't work out. The most successful colonies, the most successful animal structures are when there is a matriarchy. Look at the bees, they do it so well, and everyone loves honey, and, you know, sweet things happen when the women lead. But regardless of whatever someone's view is on politics, there is a pressure for mums to bounce back. And with that, where did that come from in society? Hormonally, like mentally, you are going through so many changes after having a baby. Your hormones are through the roof. I remember reading something ridiculous about how the day you give birth versus the day after, it's the same as like the same drop as taking like a few hundred birth control pills and then going from that to nothing. It's just a huge drop. So if you're going through that many hormonal changes, on top of that, your sleepless nights because you're looking after a baby, anyone else in history goes through that, like, you know, some huge surgery, whatever, they get handed a whole self-care, this is what you need to do package. Mothers get handed a nappy and go, crack on. So I think there needs to be so much more empathy for mothers. But that being said, you know, the pressure to bounce back is so there. And, you know, I think it's so sexualized as well, the whole MILF thing, that, you know, it's not looked at in the nurturing lens that it should be. It's looked at in a sexualized lens. It's looked at in a misogynistic lens. And it doesn't benefit anyone, because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, mums are the predominant caregivers, especially for the kind of earlier stages of life, to the point that this should be something that people do nourish and have so much respect for, but it's not there. And so, you know, mums, especially in today's day and age, are doing so much more on their own than ever before, which is backed up by science. And then on top of that, there's so much pressure for how they look. And that's not new. That's been a thing for ages. You even have the history of it, like, oh, when your husband comes back home, make sure you're smiling, your hair's done. And I remember reading a book in my early teen years about the expectations that were on a woman for when her husband came back home. And it's like, oh, when your husband's gone to sleep, that's when you can put your face creams on, this kind of stuff. And I remember sitting there thinking, why on earth would I have a husband if that's what was expected of me? And yeah, so I think whether or not this resonates with someone, I think it is an important thing to highlight that mothers have this added pressure than ever before, but it's always been there so long as the patriarchy has existed, to look a certain way, to act a certain way. I think the mental health of mothers and having body dysmorphia post-baby is most likely going to rise if society doesn't change their view on things. So I really wanted to raise that as a topic, because I would not be a good member of society and a mother myself, and just supporting women and men in general, because at the end of the day, who's raising the future men? Who's giving birth to the future men? We need to be nurturing this, and it's so important. As much as we love to discuss how things come to be, the origins, as well as how they can manifest, I also believe it's really great to discuss solutions, because it's great to talk about things and we can cover them in depth, as I have. But that being said, we want solutions. We want to know how we leave the rut. So for the people that suffer, like my old friend did, where she was in the plague of comparison and she wasn't able to really enjoy life without comparison, and this dysmorphia was impacting her to every degree possible, therapy is something that you should consider, because I feel at that point it's impacting the existence of your everyday life. You're not able to live a day without it really impacting the way that you live life. And so she would go to gym with that in mind. She would go on social media with that in mind. She would drag her friends into it. That I'm like, you do need to get professional support. And I don't think you need to run to the hills and get like the most intense service out there, but just someone that helps speak it through to you, the logic of it, and just cover where it came from and help you really nip it in the bud. But for everyone else who might have it a bit more lighter, or just it doesn't impact them as much, like myself, I'd consider, I've been reading up kind of lighter methods that should help. Things like looking at yourself in the mirror and doing reflection work, where you speak to yourself, you just evaluate how you look and slowly just kind of come to terms with, this is who you are, this is your reflection, and affirmations alongside this, just to confirm that you are beautiful and that what you're looking at is completely acceptable, and just learning to love what's there and accepting the fact that sometimes you're going to look at it and not be sure, and other times you're going to look at it and go, okay, hi. So yeah, it's just about familiarizing yourself. Nervous system regulation. So nervous system regulation can happen in multiple different ways. My favorite one is going out for a walk in nature. So admittedly, the getting there is very difficult, because as someone who has ADHD, I go through ruts where I really struggle to motivate myself to get out. However, once I'm out there, I'm like, oh, this is great. Why didn't I do this earlier? But for some reason, there's this massive stagnation, and like it feels like I'm walking through sludge just to get myself out the door. But once I'm out the door, it's great. So I feel like once you can get yourself out to nature, just out and about and active, that always helps. Gua sha, I don't know how people pronounce it. I'm going to write it here, because I've seen about 12 different ways that people pronounce it, so I don't know which one's the right way. Someone who knows, please tell me. But yeah, that's really good, because like lymphatic drainage, everything. I mean, if you can afford it, go get a massage. Really a good massage. I've seen people get bad ones and it's not good. You want good ones. But yeah, but even for yourself, just like, give yourself a shoulder rub, especially towards the neck. If you like, do it carefully, because neck's obviously a very delicate area, but you can help your lymphatic drainage from what's going on in your brain down to your neck, because your neck is holding a lot. So if you can do that properly and really help drain the lymphatic system, very helpful. But then on top of that, groundwork, breath work, grounding. But grounding typically happens when you're in nature. But even just if you've got a garden, put your feet on the grass, go to the park. If you're near a beach, sand is really lovely, just feet on sand. I know some people are weird with textures. My ex would like that. But if you can find your way, it's really good. Breath work is one of the things that you can do anywhere you go. Breath work, it just helps. So finding a way to regulate that nervous system really can help you just return to the moment that you're in. Switching the phone off as well. Like, people struggle with that because they are addictive. These are addictive phones. So, and just devices in general. But switch it off and just reconnect with what's around you. Always very helpful. Life is defined by the cute little moments that you have in the everyday. I think people, especially in the romantic sense, expect these huge firework moments all the time. Normally that ends up being very toxic. So, you know, the cute things are in the small things, like cups of teas and, you know, happy little hugs and snuggles and someone remembering your favorite chocolate, that kind of stuff. And it's the same for you when it comes to your relationship with yourself. It's just about appreciating the little moments that some days you're going to look at yourself and go, nah. And other days you're going to look at yourself and go, ah. And the most of the time it's just going to be like, okay, cool, I've got other things to focus on, and that's it. And the last point is healing. I'm going to cover a lot of healing on my page because that's a thing that I'm going through, and at least I can speak about that from lived experience. But healing is real, and it is possible to regain that softness and that love for the life that, you know, people so very often lose because of trauma they go through. And even if you've been in survival mode for years, it is possible to get to that point where you love life again and you feel like, you know what, things do feel sunny and sparkly again. And as someone who's gone through very like dark chapters of life where, you know, people haven't been very kind and you think there's no way out of that, there is. You just need to sit with the pain and really sit there and go, I'm going to face you head on and I'm going to get through this. There's always room for softness and rediscovery. You just need to give yourself the chance. And the last kind of thing I want to cover is just the encouragement and closure that you deserve. Because at the end of the day, clearly this is a thing that people are going through. It's a real problem, and it might not be the most serious problem, but it's an intense thing that is covering a lot of people's lives. And you deserve to have that closure to realize that, first of all, you're not alone in this. And I feel so much better knowing that I'm not alone in this and that people are going through this. Because for some reason, if you don't feel like you're a weirdo and you're the only one, it does help. And I think the more people realize when it comes to mental health issues, when it comes to kind of intrusive thoughts, that they're not alone and that this is actually a normal human experience, it does help you get past it so much more feasibly. And I think, you know, just to realize that whatever it may be, you are not alone, it's a really helpful realization. And specifically when it comes to facial dysmorphia, your face isn't wrong, but your perception is wrong. Like, you have been wounded. Your perception of this world and yourself has been wounded. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, I don't think I've met one individual that has not had some form of trauma or adversity in their life in some shape or form. And once you also realize that is a reality of the world, you will realize that this does happen to people, and unfortunately hurt people do hurt people, and it's sort of a cycle until you go, I'm not going to let this impact my life anymore. So obviously things can be big and they can have these huge ripple effects, but you can slowly start to regain that power over yourself and your mind, and just try and like get that inner peace back to yourself. And I really do hope that you get that, because I'm trying to get there, and I think it's an ever-growing journey. I don't think it's ever going to stop. And, you know, you have some good days, you have some bad days, and then the rest of the time it's sort of like a boring, grey middle space that I think people also need to be okay with. I think that's the real world. It's not this great, colourful experience that everyone advertises on social media.